I am back this week with a new tutorial, and in this video I'm going to be showing you guys how to cut and sew a skirt, which is basically when you have a pair of shorts and a skirt in the same garment. So you can either have it in such a way that the short is a lining underneath the skirt, or you can have a layer of the skirt that goes across the front. There are a few different ways you can actually create this. The one I'm going to be showing you in this video is this style here. It has a flap of skirts across the front like this, and then on the back you have the shorts. I decided to use this really beautiful print because it's no news that I love color and I love print. Feel free to use any fabric that you're happy with. This pattern tutorial is for woven fabric, so just keep that in mind when you're picking your materials. The first half I show you how to make the patterns. I work from my basic trouser block, and then I go ahead to cut and sew in the second half of this video. So make sure to keep on watching. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed. Subscribe and join the DIY fam if you haven't already, so you'll be the very first to know every single week when I have new videos on the channel. So let's jump straight into this video. This is actually a very cool garment to put together, and I assure you, you will not be let down when you have it on, honestly. If you don't have a basic trouser pattern, I strongly recommend you watch this tutorial first, or trace around your favorite pair of trousers to have patterns that you can work with. In terms of the design, I always like to sketch it down first so I know how many pattern pieces I need, and I have my measurements down by the side ready to go. So I already have my front and back trouser patterns. I'm going to be linking the tutorial down below for anyone who hasn't seen it yet. You also need a tape measure, scissors, pen, your pattern master, and a fresh set of pattern paper. For fabrics, I wanted to work with something really bright and colorful since it's for summer, and I'm going to be working with this Ankara fabric print here. I also have some interlining which I'll be using to fuse my facing. I have my black invisible zip and some buttons which I'll be fixing along the waist. This I ended up changing to a different button later on, but you would need some buttons to use. So because I already have my trouser pattern done, I just made some changes on that pattern to create my shorts. I dropped the waistline by about 1.5 inches and reduced the side waist by about 1 inch. I also went ahead to reduce my crouch length by 1 inch on the back and on the front. This I actually ended up regretting later on, just so you know, but these are the changes I made for the trouser pattern. Also decide on how long you want your shorts to be. Because of the style of this design, you want it to be on the shorter side. It just looks a lot more flattering that way, but whatever you prefer works for you since you'll be the one wearing the garment. I also went ahead to draw in my facing along the waistline. My facing is about 6 centimeters or 1 inch wide. I did that for the front and for the back trouser pattern. So once I have these plans ready, I can go ahead and trace off the different pattern pieces I need from this pattern plan. So I went ahead to trace out my front shorts, which is this one here. Is about 16 inches in terms of length. I also added a 3 centimeter or 1 inch hem allowance. For trouser or shorts, just remember when you do that inner hem allowance, remember to fold it up in such a way that it points in the same direction as that inner leg sort of curve. Just keep that in mind. I went ahead to add annotations as well as my grain line, and I'm going to go ahead to trace off my front facing. For the facing, I'm going to fold in that in such a way that it does not come into the facing because I don't need it on the facing piece itself. So I'm just using some sellotape to hold this piece down like so, and I'm going to get some fresh pattern paper and trace off the facing along the waist, along the center front, and along along the bottom and side edges. I went ahead to also add a 1 centimeter seam allowance all the way around, added my notches, and then cut this piece out, and this is what it should look like. The facing will help you to finish off that waistline nice and smoothly on the garment. So I'm going to basically repeat the same thing for the back pattern. So trace off the back main shorts, trace off the back facing, so I have my front and my back patterns ready to go. So we have our back main short pattern here. I've also added my darts. Don't forget to do the same for your front. Add your notches along the hip, along the hem, and along that center back, so when you're cutting this piece on fabric, it's a whole lot easier. So now that I've done this for my main back short, I went ahead and did the same thing for the facing. Remember to fold in that dart before you trace off your facing, because by the time you stitch up the dart on the main short itself and attach the facing, you don't have any extra measurements that you don't need. For the skirt panel itself, the first thing you need to do is trace off the side seam of either the front or the back panels of the shorts, and just trace along that side, adding your notches, because the skirt is going to sit into the side seam of the shorts. I'm also going to transfer the waistline up until the point where the dart is, and the waistline of the skirt is half of your waist measurement minus about 2.5 inches. This would ensure that a little bit of the short actually shows on that other side of the garment, but it's up to you to decide how far you want the skirt to wrap across. So for me, I worked to 12 inches in terms of the waist length, and I'm just connecting that back to this curved edge like so. The front on this other edge is straight across, and then the bottom is curved up to the hem. The skirt hem stops before the hem allowance of the shorts. Just keep that in mind when you're creating your own plan. If you want a facing, my facing here is about 6 centimeters or 2 inches wide, and it goes across the waist, that front edge, and along the hem. This will help you finish off the skirt panel of the garment, but you have the option of just cutting 2 pieces of this skirt pattern, so even when you open the skirt on the wrong side, it's a nice finished edge. So I went ahead to trace out my skirt facing pattern, and this is what it looks like. The facing is created in such a way that if you wanted to add lining to that part of the garment, you can do that as well. You just trace off that inner area and add seam allowance and connect that back to the facing. But we wouldn't be doing that for this particular tutorial. I have all of my patterns ready to cut on fabric. I went ahead to cut my front and my back as well as my skirt pieces, and because of the way this print is structured, I had to play around a bit before I got the definition and the direction I wanted. I also went ahead to cut my notches from the pattern onto the fabrics itself, along the waist, along the center front, the center back, as well as my side pieces. For the skirts panel itself, I just cut 2 so you have a pair, and I just joined that all around and attached it to the short along the side. As for the front and back and facing pieces, I cut 2 of each. So for each panel or each piece that you can see here, there is a pair. So in terms of sewing, I'm going to be starting out with my darts like I like to, and I always transfer the darts from the pattern to the fabric using a pin and a chalk. So once I puncture that dart point onto the fabric, I use a chalk to mark that point, so we know we have a fairly similar dart placement on both pieces. So I'm just pinning the dart along the waist on both sides of this back panel, because this is the back of the shorts, and I repeated the same thing for the front. The front is the teal colored one, or the one to your right hand side. So now that we have all of our darts pinned in place, I'm going to be taking this to my machine, sewing with a normal straight stitch, remembering to do a reverse stitch at the beginning and at the end of my dart. So now that I have all of my dart pieces stitched and steamed, I'm going to be overlocking along that crouch line before joining them together for the front and for the back. So I'm going to grab all these pieces and overlock this edge on my overlocker. Do this for the back pieces and for the front pieces as well before joining this crouch seam together in place. I like joining this area first before joining that middle point that connects left leg to right leg. So now that we have the front panels joined and steamed like this, and we have our back panels joined and steamed, I'm going to go ahead and work on the skirt panel. The first thing you need to do for joining the skirt is putting right sides together, and we're going to be sewing along the hem, along that front edge and along the waistline, connecting both layers together. But remember to leave that side edge open so you can turn this inside out. So sewing on a 1 cm seam allowance, I'm joining both layers along that bottom edge, that front edge, and along the waistline, just using one continuous stitch so I don't have to like re-sew each time. So when I get to a corner, I just turn in the other direction until I make my way to the end of this seam here. So once I reach that end, I'm going to remember to trim my corners so when I turn this inside out, I have a nice sharp edge. So I'm going to take this to my iron, turn it inside out and give it a nice press, and this is what it should look like. And I'm going to be grabbing that skirt piece and sandwiching it on the right side seam of the shorts. Remember to leave at least a 1 cm edge on that waistline when you're fixing the skirt into the side seam so you have room to attach your facing later on. So I'm just pinning that skirt piece in between the layers, and I've pinned the other side as well. And we're going to be stitching up the side seams of the shorts, remembering to catch that side seam of the skirt as well. I'm also going to be sewing that bottom crouch seam that connects the left leg of the shorts to the right leg of the shorts. So by the time you're done stitching all of this together, we can give this a try to see if it fits right. Alright, so I just wanted to quickly put this on and check for the fit. I like the fit of the shorts itself. It's nice and like really tight on the legs, which is what I wanted. One thing I would say is I think for the crouch length for the front, I feel like we should have not taken that 1 inch away because it feels really tight. There is wearable, but it just feels like just a little bit tight. And something else I was doing is this is the edge of the skirt, but it's slightly above the waistline of the shorts. So the only way this is going to work for me now is I have to fold this inwards by 2 inches like that before it aligns nicely on the side with the waist of the shorts, like so. But I'm not mad at it so far. It's looking really good. I still need to fold up the hem so that finish off there like this. So I need to do that for both legs. I need to fix the facing and then the zip to finish this up. But I like how I played with the placement of the prints. So you have the purple going from this back panel onto the skirt, and then you have some of the teal from the front connecting all together. Then you have a bit of that purple there, and then you go back to the green print. So I'm happy with the print play on this one. After that, I went ahead to overlock all my seams and fold the hem along that 3 cm or 1 inch hem allowance for both legs of the shorts. And I'm going to be stitching this hem in such a way that we have a nice finish on the bottom of the shorts. So I'm going to take this in my machine, and because I already have everything pinned in place, I don't have to think a lot when I'm actually sewing. And I'm going to do this for the left and for the right hand side. Give it a nice press before going ahead to attach my zip. I'm going to be fixing an invisible zip into the center back seam of the shorts. I made sure that I left that part of the shorts seam open so I could attach the zip in place. I have a separate tutorial which is detailed and shows you how to pin and sew invisible zips into seams of garments, and I'm going to be linking that on the screen for anyone who hasn't seen that yet. But basically with invisible zips, you have to fold the tape a little bit out and sew closer to the teeth so it looks invisible on the seam of the garment. Next up, I'm going to be working on my facing panels. I already fused them with my interlining on the wrong side of the fabric before pinning them together, putting right panels in place, and I'm going to be sewing the side seams of front panels to the back and then joining up that center front edge before going in to overlock all of the seams as well as the hem, since we're not going to be attaching this facing to the lining on the inside of the shorts. So once that is done, I'm going to grab this facing piece and we're going to be joining it to the waistline of the shorts. I like to pin specific points in place, such as center front of the facing to the center front of the shorts, side seam to side seam, center back to center back, so they actually align along those points. Once everything is pinned in place, I'm going to sew along the center back edge and waistline, connecting the facing to the waistline of the shorts. So I'm going to sew on a 1 centimeter seam allowance all the way around, and after doing that, trim down those center back edge corners, so when we push that zip edge through along the center back, we have a nice pointed finished edge. After doing this, I'm going to go back into that facing edge and I'm going to be sewing the seam allowance to the facing on the wrong side on a 0.5 very tiny edge stitch, and that's going to help to tuck the facing on the inside of the garment. After doing this, I went ahead to give the waistline a nice press just to relax all of the seams, and this is what the edge stitch looks like. It's optional, but I always find that whenever I do this, the waistline just looks a lot nicer. So once that is all done, the next thing you need to do is figure out the buttonhole and the button for your skirt piece. So I went ahead to mark the buttonhole on the skirt first before sewing in the buttonhole using my domestic machine. I have a great tutorial on the channel which shows you how to do this with the Brother LS14, and after doing this, this is what the buttonhole looks like. I'm going to go in to cut the buttonhole open using a small scissors so I have it ready to attach my button. So for my button, I ended up changing it to a slightly smaller button because I found the other one to be a bit too big. So this was sort of like the alternative that I worked with. Once that is all done with the button stitched in place, this is what the finished garment looks like. I'm very happy with the outcome. The only thing I would change is not really adjusting that crouch length and just leaving it the way it was. But besides that, everything else worked rather well. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. If you did, let me know your thoughts down below. And until my next video, have a good morning, afternoon, and evening wherever you are. Bye.